You might think pirates spent their time swaggering around with swords and loud airs, shouting about buried treasure. But here's something history books don't tell you. A pretty shocking number of women secretly dressed as male pirates to sail the high seas. I mean, that's right. Female swashbucklers disguised in baggy breeches, tricorn hats slightly too big, trying not to sneeze or trip over their own feet lest they blow their cover. Now you're probably picturing some heroic disguise scenes with flawless wigs and perfect makeup. Spoiler alert, it did not work like that. This wasn't a Hollywood costume party. It was a gritty, dangerous life where blowing your cover could mean a swift walk to Davy Jones' locker. Let me tell you something wild about women who dared to live as male pirates, especially in an era when women barely got to vote, let alone lead a mutiny. And trust me, the solutions they came up with for keeping their secret were downright ingenious and sometimes downright ridiculous. First off, let's talk about the problem straight up. Why on earth would a woman risk everything just to dress as a man and become a pirate? Well, piracy was one of the few gigs where women could attempt a shot at real freedom, adventure, or just a way to escape the poverty or domestic prisons awaiting them on land. But to even get aboard a pirate ship, a woman had to pretend to be a man because ships were male-only zones, and the mere suspicion of a female sailor could cause chaos bigger than a cannonball hitting the powder keg. Imagine the crew's reaction if someone found out one of their brothers was actually a sister. Talk about ruining your fearsome reputation. Pirates prided themselves on a brutal brotherhood, strict codes of loyalty, and a peculiar kind of masculinity that didn't leave room for anything outside the macho box. So hiding gender wasn't just about sneaking a role, it was about survival. The problem of concealment was compounded by what you might call the no privacy on a ship challenge. Pirate ships, even the smallest ones like the notorious Queen Anne's Revenge commanded by Blackbeard, crammed 50 men into seamen's quarters smaller than a modern-day walk-in closet. There were no separate bathrooms, no private cabins, just hammocks strung side by side, bodies pressed together like sardines in a barrel. Keeping a woman's secret under those conditions. Mission impossible. But these female pirates didn't just jump ship when it got tough. Instead, they took some pretty creative, if sometimes gross, measures. Because nothing says keeping a secret like rigging yourself to avoid communal showers or getting crafty with cross-dressing tactics that could give even the craftiest cosplayer a run for their money. Now picture the first big failure in this saga. A woman trying the obvious approach of simply blending in without any special accommodations. Bad idea. Really bad idea. Historical accounts mention a few early failed attempts where women either stumbled walking in rough seas. Remember, your ship could be pitching violently, tossing pirates like rag dolls, or accidentally slipped while doing traditionally male chores, leading to suspicious glances and whispered rumors. A classic example is Anne Bonny, one of the most famous cross-dressing female pirates from the early 1700s. Before she became the notorious pirate queen, Anne put on men's clothes to sneak aboard pirate ships. With her lover but her temper, another stereotypically male trait back then, nearly gave her away. So yeah, blending in was never about just wearing pants. It involved acting the part, and that was a whole different rodeo. Spoiler alert, just wearing men's clothes didn't magically fool the crew. These ships were so cramped and crews so tight-knit that strange smells or an extra touch of scent, like perfume or feminine soap, could blow a woman's cover faster than a spy caught with a secret letter. Some women tried to mask this by keeping their scent neutral or, on the flip side, smelling overly manly by dousing themselves in the same salty sweat and gunpowder residue that saturated every pirate on board. Let's just say it wasn't pretty, and probably left everyone wondering why this particular guy never seemed to have the usual piratical ode to seaweed and stale rum. Here's where it gets interesting. Apart from behavioral reprogramming and scent camouflage, some female pirates used more literal old-school methods to maintain their disguise, strategies close to what we'd call body management. Historical records and new research suggest that some women resorted to tightly binding their chests with whatever fabric or leather they could scavenge. Think of it like an early form of compression garment, but slapdash and uncomfortable, especially on long, wet sea voyages. This was no easy feat given the stifling heat and relentless humidity aboard these sailing death traps. Imagine guys sweltering in thick, salt-caked coats, while a woman was squeezed into something that could qualify as medieval torture gear to hide her gender. Pretty cruel, but effective for fooling quick glances from noses that needed to be sharper than a jagged cutlass. And then, the constant risk of discovery during medical emergencies. Talk about ruining your fearsome rep, and personal hygiene, which was a whole other Pandora's box. Pirate ships were notorious for bad smells, lice infestations, and worse. Women posing as men couldn't exactly explain away issues like menstrual cycles or the need for certain medical attentions without sounding the alarm. Some cleverly concocted fake stories, feigning chronic illnesses that explained occasional weakness or disappearing from sight for brief periods. At least until pirates developed the somewhat unsavory habit of diagnosing every complaint as the scurvy. A nutritional deficiency caused by lack of vitamin C that made gums bleed and teeth fall out. If you think a bunch of salty, sinister men getting gum rot was bad enough, picture explaining away anything gender-related with a vague scurvy, because in the pirates' world, that was the catch-all diagnosis for, "I have no clue what's wrong with you." Speaking of scurvy, let's not forget how that gremlin in the pirates' diet influenced women pirates' disguises too. Since fresh fruits were near impossible to keep on board, everyone's skin turned an unhealthy shade, hair thinned, and teeth looked like a pirate's version of a broken piano. It was basically a walking horror show. All pirates looked like walking zombies, which ironically somewhat helped women blend in despite their real biological differences. That meant a woman dressed as a man didn't need to be runway ready, which was both a comfort and a curse because appearances were hardly a priority when everyone smelled like rotten seaweed and old socks anyway. Back to the failures. Some female pirates accidentally revealed their identities in fights because, let's face it, fighting is not exactly the best time to keep your chest out of harm's way. Anne Bonny again comes to mind. During a battle off the coast of the Carolinas in the early 1720s, she fought fiercely, reportedly yelling at her male crewmates to hit harder. When captured, she revealed her gender to avoid execution, leveraging the convention that women weren't to be hanged but imprisoned or released, a surprisingly lucky legal loophole. So, in some cases, the best way to keep your secret was to reveal it at the right time and hope for a miracle. However, the real genius was the way some women embedded themselves into pirate crews, not just as fighters, but as trusted comrades with specific roles that kept suspicion low. For instance, some served as navigators or spies, duties requiring smarts and subtlety rather than brute strength. This was an accidental discovery. It turned out that the cognitive demands of navigation, map reading, and coordinating complex sea maneuvers didn't care whether you had a Y chromosome or not. Pirates didn't know it, but women generally have an excellent sense of spatial awareness and multitasking, which worked to their advantage when it came to tricking their mates. So rather than awkwardly swinging cutlasses like pros, some female pirates focused on being the brains behind the operation. Pretty clever for a bunch of illiterate sea rats, right? One infamous tale involves Mary Read, another legendary female pirate who, like Anne Bonny, dressed as a man for years. Mary actually started her marine career disguised as a man while serving in the British military before turning to piracy. What makes her story particularly fascinating is how she not only survived harsh naval discipline, but thrived aboard pirate vessels. Her disguise was so complete, and her fighting skills so fierce that her gender was only discovered when she fell seriously ill years into her voyages, something that couldn't be faked or hidden. Ironically, her illness saved her life because, by pirate law, women weren't supposed to be executed, so instead, she was imprisoned, which was probably a relief compared to a gallows noose. Now, here's where things get even more bizarre. Women pirates weren't just hiding their identity for a romantic adventure. It was a life-or-death gamble. The seas were full of disease, starvation, brutal storms, and hostile navies patrolling relentlessly. Any slip-up could lead to immediate execution or worse, being abandoned on some island without food or water. And speaking of survival tricks, consider the armor of masculinity they had to wear. Try imagining hiding your true voice, which some female pirates managed by roughening their voices, skipping singing at taverns, or just grunting their way through conversations. Because nothing says, "I'm a terrifying pirate," like an incomprehensible growl instead of a proper speech. Some even went as far as applying skillful scar or dirt placement to make their faces look weathered and brutal, like a natural-born salty dog. Believe it or not, these elaborate disguises extended beyond the ship's decks. On land, when pirates docked in ports like Nassau or Tortuga, women had to quickly adopt male roles to navigate taverns, black markets, and threats from colonial authorities. This meant swapping out bulky sea coats for inconspicuous hats and rags, trying very hard not to walk into any "no women allowed" areas that might get them arrested or worse. Some stories describe women being mistaken for wandering orphans or apprentices, roles that allowed them a bit more social latitude while hiding in plain sight. Talk about high-stakes cosplay with deadly consequences. So the shocking truth about women pirates dressed as men isn't just that they did it. It's how they lived with that secret every single day amid all the dangers of pirate life. They didn't have the luxury of Netflix and chill to relax after revealing their true selves. Instead, they battled sea monsters, rival navies, and worse, constant suspicion from their own crews. Their daily efforts to maintain disguise, survive brutal conditions, and prove themselves were as epic as any treasure hunt or cannon battle. And believe me, the creative solutions they devised to keep their secrets safe and their bodies intact were stranger than any pirate legend you've heard at your local dive bar. Alright, so we've covered how women pirates disguise themselves to survive aboard cramped, stinky ships full of suspicious, sweaty men. But let's dive deeper into the gritty daily grind of maintaining that disguise because, spoiler alert, it wasn't a one-and-done deal. It was a relentless, exhausting hustle. Kind of like trying to pass a 6-hour job interview while juggling flaming cutlasses and dodging cannonballs. One massive problem was voice. You might think, oh, just talk like a man, easy enough, right? Bad idea. Really bad idea. Changing your voice isn't as simple as clearing your throat. Female pirates had to roughen up their tone to pass for the low, gravelly growls associated with seafarers, or just grunt so much that no one expected eloquence. If someone caught you humming a sea shanty in a sweet soprano, you'd be found out faster than a drunken lookout missing a ship on the horizon. Take Mary Read, for example. According to reports after her capture in 1721, she could imitate men's voices so convincingly that her crewmates swore she was one of the boys. But the effort to keep that up was brutal. Imagine constantly suppressing natural speech patterns while living elbow to elbow with people who could hear every inflection during sneezes or coughing fits. Plus, when illness struck, voice changes became harder. Both Mary Read and Anne Bonny reportedly fell ill multiple times, revealing more than just physical weakness. They ran the risk of their true identity slipping out, which in pirate culture was basically a death sentence. In fact, Mary's gender was only discovered when she was too sick to keep up the act, prompting her to confess rather than face execution, which actually saved her life because pirate law was weirdly chivalrous and didn't allow women to be hanged. But let's switch gears to hygiene, because if pirates already nearly lived in a stinky nightmare on land, the sea was their version of a garbage dump with salt water replacing showers. Remember, keeping a secret gender in a place where washing meant dunking your head in briny water once every day or two, if you were lucky, was a logistical nightmare. Women couldn't just disappear to a private corner to freshen up or deal with menstrual cycles. They had to get creative or risk awkward questions. Some female pirates reportedly used makeshift cloth pads and timed their private moments when the entire crew was below deck or busy fighting off naval patrols. You can probably guess how that ended. Lots of discomfort, unsanitary conditions, and potentially hazardous infections. Talk about rocking the crabs instead of the boat. Now, speaking of gross but ingenious, pirates actually stumbled upon natural antiseptics without realizing the science behind them. Pirates often used rum and vinegar to clean wounds because the high alcohol content killed bacteria, making it 70% effective against infection. Pretty impressive for the early 1700s. Female pirates, using the same remedies, managed to reduce infections despite the grime and tight quarters. Anne Bonny reportedly carried a small bottle of spiced rum, not just for swearing and drinking but to dab on cuts or burns, masking pains that might otherwise reveal their softer side. Pretty clever, considering medical knowledge back then was basically throwing lemon juice and hope at anything that bled. Also, this antiseptic interplay helped maintain their hardened image amongst their brothers, because nothing says menacing pirate like a subtle hint of vinegar and a fresh bruise from last night's brawl. On the clothing front, beyond the chest binding, there was a lot more wardrobe wrestling going on than you'd think. Pirate attire wasn't exactly tailored runway fashion. It was practically military-grade hand-me-down rags designed for durability. But keeping gender hidden also meant strategically choosing garments that masked hips or other curves. Remember, breeches were generally loose but had their limits. Some women layered tunics, coats, and even tucked their hair under oversized hats or scarves to avoid suspicion. Historical accounts describe Anne Bonny wearing men's garments that were too big for her but made her look bulkier, trading off mobility for secrecy. That, ladies, is early boyfriend jeans before it was cool. The downside: all this layering meant overheating, especially in tropical climates like the Caribbean where humidity hovered around 80 to 90% year-round. You do the math, sweltering for hours in damp wool and leather sounds less like pirate glam, more like medieval sauna torture. Now, here's a flair for the dramatic: the psychological toll. Maintaining a false identity under constant scrutiny is exhausting in any scenario, but imagine living in a cesspool of seasickness, cannon fire, and grumbling, suspicious men whose job was literally to expect betrayal. Some records hint that female pirates dealt with intense paranoia, always scanning for signs they were outed. The pressure to perform masculinity meant masking pain, suppressing feminine habits, and reinforcing the myth of pirate brotherhood daily. This likely forged a special kind of resilience, but it also fractured identities. Anne Bonny once said, "If I had been born a man, I would have been a better pirate still." Now, let's peel back the curtain on leadership and combat, because female pirates didn't just blend in, they sometimes led charges and inspired fear. Anne Bonny and Mary Read were known for their ferocity in battle. Their gender disguise didn't make them less effective fighters. If anything, it added to their mystique. There's a juicy story from a battle near the Bahamas in 1720, where Anne reportedly threatened to slice her male crewmates if they wavered in fight. The hilarious part: she did this while dressed awkwardly in oversized clothes, brandishing a cutlass that was too big for her hand. But her sheer venomous attitude kept everyone in line. Turns out confidence and attitude might be the ultimate secret weapons, even if your pants fall halfway down. Interestingly, once captured, female pirates often subverted pirate law to their advantage. We talked about Mary Read's illness sparing her execution. Anne Bonny famously claimed to be pregnant during her trial, a savvy legal move because colonial courts generally delayed or commuted sentences for pregnant women. She used this to avoid hanging, buying time that no doubt kept her alive in grim, overcrowded jails. This kind of quick thinking shows that their cross-dressing was only one aspect of survival. They navigated legal and social systems with the same cunning they used to cheat death at sea. Also worth noting, not all women pirates disguised themselves solely for freedom or escape. Some came from privilege or wealth but chose piracy for sheer rebellion or boredom with their prescribed roles. They saw dressing as men and joining pirate crews as an exhilarating chance to defy societal norms. Imagine turning your back on aristocratic dinners to sweat it out on a ship where the main menu was salted pork and spit. It says a lot about the magnetic pull of pirate life that these women endured the hardships of disguise and brutality just for a taste of freedom. But beyond individual stories, why does this matter? Well, these women challenge everything we think we know about pirate history, exposing a secret undercurrent that pirates were not just brutish men pillaging the seas, but complex communities with hidden diversity. Their stories remind us that gender was, and still is, a social performance as much as a biological fact. These women found ways to rewrite the rules, blending fearlessness with clever disguises, turning pirate brotherhood into a kind of pirate family that could defy even the harshest odds. Let's close by circling back to the biggest lesson from these stories. Surviving as a woman disguised as a male pirate was a masterclass in human ingenuity and grit. From binding and scent camouflage to faking voices and legal loopholes, these women managed to pull off daily miracles that deserve way more recognition than swashbuckling cliches. So next time you think pirates were just grunting, sword-swinging men chasing bling, remember the oddball, clear-headed women who spent endless days hiding in plain sight. fighting storms, enemies, and societal norms, all while looking like just another scruffy sea dog. Truth is, the greatest treasure on the high seas wasn't gold. It was the freedom to live your own story, no matter the clothes you wore. And in that, these female pirates weren't just shaking up pirate lore, they were shaking up history itself.